Good morning. Thank you everybody for coming. Continuing was just introduction about the first week when they changed the clock. I always was mesupik, when people spend the extra hour. Do you spend the extra hour the night before or the morning after? I think it's like credit cards. Most people spend it twice. So I'm not sure you necessarily get the extra time.
I paid mine back.
Yeah, pay it on time. So today's share, continuing the theme of the parsha, is about all these different brachos that we have for thunder, lightning, rainbows, and unicorns. A wide world of brachos. And I thought it was a good topic to talk on Parshas Noach. Sharfman years ago gave a share about the reign of terror. And he lived in South Florida, so sometimes you get caught in a storm. So your clothes get wet, socks get wet, everything gets wet. How do you deal with that on Shabbos? That was his share, the reign of terror. But this share, which I'd like to give today, since I moved to South Florida 6 years ago, is something that was always bothering me. It rains in New York. Yeah. You have bad weather there quite a bit. It snows too. But the amount of thunder and lightning storms, especially outside of the summer, you don't get so many. Rainbows, I never used to see those in New York. Not just because of the smog, but you barely saw these things. When you live here in South Florida, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's noticed, you have thunder and lightning. I remember times I'd walk at night back from yeshiva down the canal on Shabbos or Yontif, and you just see bolts and bolts of lightning in the sky. No thunder, just bolts and bolts of lightning. All these fascinating phenomena in the tropical climate in South Florida, you see. Rainbows. I even remember driving, I believe it was Yom Kippur, Erev Yom Kippur, to Kol Nidre. I'm making the turn on Miami Gardens Drive. Always like looking at the water behind the yeshiva, behind the building. I see this huge rainbow in the sky. Hope that's a good omen coming into Yom Kippur. But we'll see. We'll talk about all these ideas. You know, what is quite amazing is Hashem structured the world and the halacha behind it, that there's so many interesting things. There are brachos that we say on so many different facets of life. If some people remember, it wasn't so long ago. There's a concept of Birchas Hachama. Once every 28 years, there's a cycle, and there's a special bracha you make on the sun once every 28 years. And if you're living your life every 28 years as a benchmark, like I was here the last time, I remember I was the time before, it's a pretty big cycle. And it's amazing how all these different cycles, phenomenon in the world, Hashem set up in halacha brachos for us to market. And there's significance to all these ideas and things. There's something to learn from it. It's not just nature running its course. We believe every one of these divine orchestrated events are something that we're supposed to realize, focus on, and mark. Now we'll see, we'll go through all these different brachos. There are different halachos, and a lot of it might be a little different than we might be accustomed to. So let's begin. The Shulchan Aruch and Siman Reish Chav Zayin. I'm not sure who made the titles for these simanim. probably was a printer. I don't know, it was Beis Yosef. But this siman is called Brachos HaZikim, but that's only part of what's going on over here. Al Zikim. What are these Zikim? Kimin kochav ayorik kechetz, ba'orach hashmayim mimakom amakom. It's a star that shoots like an arrow in the heavens from place to place. V'nimshach oro kishevet. Basically, this is an idea called a shooting star. V'al rodas haaretz. I know we're zocheh to have some people here from California. On an earthquake, there's a bracha to make on an earthquake, right? You know, there's a lot of things rumbling through a person's mind when experiencing an earthquake. But the Shulchan Aruch says one of the ideas is Hilchos Brachos. What bracha to make by an earthquake? Val Brakim. Brakim, if you look at the bottom of the Mishnah Berurah, it says Blitzen. Hope everybody here speaks a little German. But Blitzen, huh? I have to say, yeah. Blitzen is lightning. Aramim is thunder. Varuchos shenishbu b'zav. You have winds that blow with a certain strength, right? That might be what we in South Florida call a hurricane. Tornado. Akol echad me'elu, on any one of these phenomena, Omer Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, Oseh Maaseh Bereshis. All these phenomena, though they may not be spelled out clear within the psukim that we just read the past couple of weeks, but they were there. All these phenomena, Mishnah Avos elaborates a little bit, are things that were made as part of creation. Hashem put into the teva of the world the concepts of shooting stars, earthquakes, hurricanes, thunder, lightning. All that is part of Ma'aseh Bereshis, and it's supposed to remind us of that. You know, Bereshis are not just a parsha that we live once a year when we learn it. Bereshis is a phenomenon, mechadish b'chol yom tamid, Ma'aseh Bereshis. We say in davening, Hashem is constantly rejuvenating that creation. So when the sun comes up in the morning, okay, I guess it came up a little bit earlier today, right? But the basic cycles, you know, we got used to. So Hashem put into the teva, if you're used to my regular sun shining, sunset, I'm not going to sing it, the moon coming out, so that we sometimes get used to. So Hashem sprinkles in all these other phenomena, which are supposed to remind us of Oseh Ma'aseh Bereshis. That's the bracha, the one we recite. Oseh Ma'aseh Bereshis on all these. Now the Shulchan Aruch writes a very strange language. V'im yirtza, and if you want, right, depending on what side of the bed you get up in the morning. V'im yirtza, and if you want, Yomer Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, Shekocho Gvuraso Malei Olam. You could say a different bracha. Blessed is Hashem, whose strength and power fills the world. Now, if you look at the Mishnah Berurah all the way in the bottom, Sivkot and Zayin, he explains, Ratzal Lomar, Baruch HaNosin Kolach, praised is Hashem, who gives strength, La'ateva, to the forms of nature, Laharas Korach Yotzer Bereshis, that Hashem shows us the power that He put into the world by creating the world. Kadeshi Yiram Olfanav. This bracha has one additional element. Kocho Gvuras Amali Olam. Your strength, your power fills the world. It's also supposed to make us tremble. She Yiram Olfanav will have fear of Hashem. And that's a bracha that you could say in these phenomena too. You think about that. I grew up in New York, lived there in Florida. I never went through a hurricane. I mean, I did go through it. I never went through an earthquake. right? If you're in your house, all of a sudden everything starts really shaking, a real earthquake. That scares you, right? Definitely little kids, we're probably used to it. But you hear a loud bolt of thunder, shakes you. If you're in the sky, if you're walking and you see a bolt of lightning, you want to get out of there. You're in a pool, in an open field. That's scary. So really, there's a bracha of Osa Masa Bereshis. These remind us that Hashem created the world. But there's another element that it brings about. It strikes fear in mortals. And that's another sentiment that one should have when they have these. And that's another bracha. So, simply put, sounds like from reading the Shulchan Aruch, you have a choice of one of two brachas. And we'll get to specifically which ones to do in a moment. So, let's start for a moment with the earthquakes and hurricanes before we get to thunder and lightning. With the earthquakes and the hurricanes, the Mishabura in Sivkot and Daled addresses, okay, so what bracha do you make? If you're locked down in your house, it's tricky. Right? For sure, a hurricane you could feel. Because, I keep on saying the wrong thing. A earthquake you could feel. So your house could all be bolted up. Usually you don't know when an earthquake's coming. But earthquake you could feel no matter where you are. A hurricane might be a little tricky. Sometimes your house is, closed in. Not necessarily you could see anything. Maybe you could hear the whistle and the yeah. But the Mishabura deals with the problem over here. The language of Shulchan Aruch says, "Shenishku b'zalf." These winds are blowing very strong. He writes, "V'im shelo b'zalf." If it's not blowing this strength of zalf, imurach gadol mevarach osa ma'aser bereshis. If it's a big wind, now he's not telling us what big means, category 1, 2, 3. But a big wind, something that's not normal, he would make the bracha, Mishabura Paskins, Osa Masa Bereshis. That's the bracha that one would make on a hurricane. And he says, V'lo yivarach shekolchu gvuraso, acharei shelo bizav gadol. If it's not with this super strength, you wouldn't make the bracha of kolchu gvuraso ma'alei olam. Sounds like Chavetz Chaim's understanding is if you really want to strike, but I'm a New Yorker, so some of us get a little nervous, you hear a hurricane watch. Ooh. Some of the old chevra, people have been here in South Florida, you see the way different people react to the hurricane warnings. Yeah, the people who've lived there, I remember by the last one, Baruch Hashem, my wife's from South Florida. So everybody's packing out to Atlanta and here and there, all the new people who moved in. But, some of the old South Florida people, and budging, we ain't going anywhere. Tells, there's different levels. So, the Chavetz Chaim says, if it's Zav Gadol, this very, very strong super winds, then you would also make this bracha of Kolchol Gvuras Ma'alei Olam, this bracha of the strength that strikes fear in people. Short of that, which is what we assume we have today, that you're going to make Osa Masa Bereshis. And the Chavetz Chaim writes, "V'tov levarach tamid haruach sa'arashin matsuya," on these winds which are not normal, we call hurricane winds. Rak bracha Osa Masa Bereshis. Shebezeh bevada yotzi mimanav shach. You should use the bracha Osa Masa Bereshis. That one you're going to be yotzi with. Don't play around with this other bracha because we don't know exactly how strong, how super strong the wind has to be to make this bracha of Kolchol Gvuras Ma'alei Olam. And the bracha Osa Masa Bereshis, that also would work for earthquakes. Yeah, what does my meteorologist in the back say? So that's what I was alluding to a little bit. By an earthquake, you're in the comfort of your home. For sure, you're feeling the earthquake. By a hurricane, is it an issue that you have to watch it? If I have hurricane-proof windows, I can watch it. If I don't, I can't see anything in my house. Everything's boarded up. But you can hear it still. And, yeah, so I'm not sure. Yes?
The fear of being in the boarded up room and not seeing what's going on could be much greater than the fear of being hurt.
That's true. The fear of being in a boarded up room is quite fearful. But so is a haunted house. We don't make brachos on those. Yes?
So the purpose of making these brachos are showing the fact that Hashem is all power, all being, whatever. Okay? But is there a bracha, does this encompass of asking for us to be saved or for kids? Or
Excellent question. Right. I'm not going through all Hilchos hurricane or earthquake for that matter. If we're experiencing a hurricane and earthquake, yes, there is this element, and we'll see in a moment, one of the requirements for these brachos is it really has to be within toch k'dei dibur, within really 3 to 4 seconds from seeing or experiencing it. So if you just heard the rumble of an earthquake, really it's these brachos are the first reaction. Once you know the halacha, and you know of these, it should really be the first reaction to do them right away, because if time elapses, then the bracha might be stale. You only have within toch k'dei dibur, which is in 3 to 4 seconds. It's the amount of time that it takes you to say Shalom Alecha Rebbe, and according to one shita, add the word Umoreh, Rebbe Umoreh. So it's a pretty short window, open or not, that one has to make these brachos. So first and foremost, you got to know the halachos of the brachos. The second thing is, yes, if a hurricane is coming, you should definitely have your tillum there. That's what you should use your flashlights for, and it's 100% appropriate to say tillum. I remember we just landed on Shabbos Chol Moed Sukkos. It's still eerie. I remember before Hurricane Irma, which we were quite nervous it was going to hit right here, north of Miami Beach. So there was a message sent from Chaim Kanievsky that as a schus, you should say this pasuk in Koheles. And the pasuk talked about winds. I don't want to quote a pasuk in Koheles by heart, but it's right there in the first parak, the first psukim of Koheles. Talks about going away the winds, let the winds go away. And Chaim Kanievsky said, as a schus, so I remember in Yeshiva we said that pasuk a few times. Yeah, there are things, definitely one should say tillum, that is the right response. But at the same time, these brachos are meant to mark an occasion. Just like, the simanim pretty close to this, right? Are the brachos of Shechianu, right? We make a bracha of Shechianu when we have different occasions in our life. Shechianu v'kimanu v'gyanu lazman hazeh. There are brachos to make when a person has a child. I went through the posting recently, even a grandchild. There are brachos to make marking major occasions, right? I didn't see for the 50th wedding anniversary a bracha to make on that, but right? Fill in your joke over there. But for the most part, for all occasions in life, you'll find many, many brachos to say. So today we're going through thunder, lightning. I'm going to get to unicorns before I get to rainbows. Now, what's interesting, and I see I have a couple of Sfardim in the room, it's brought down from the Ben Ish Chai, Sefer Kaf HaChaim, and Rebbe Tzion Abba Shaul. And I believe this is a minhag of quite a few, many Sfardim. is these brachos, they do not recite with Hashem's name. They say Baruch Kolchel Gevros Mali Allah, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, Shekolchel Gevros Mali Allah, Osam Aspirations, but they will not say the Shem of Hashem. Now that's quite interesting, because the Gemara itself says you make the bracha with Shem and Malchus. But as we'll see soon, there are many sveikos, many things which are unclear about some of these brachos. And the Sephardi psak through the ages was not to make a bracha. Now Ashkenazim all make brachos with the Shem Hashem. Our Masorah is to make brachos. But a lot of Sephardim would not make brachos on these things. They would say the bracha, but since there are a certain degree of sveikos that they had within some of these brachos, they would not make it with the Shem Hashem. However, I found that Ravaji Yosef didn't view it that way, and he felt, Gemara says we make it with the Shem Hashem, the sveikos are not really sveikos, and like the Ashkenazim, Ravaji said you would make it with the bracha. But it's interesting. Next time he's standing next to a Sephardi, when you see thunder and lightning, check out what he does. Does he make it with the Shem Hashem or not? Many, many Sephardim do not. Okay, next order of business. Do you have to stand when you recite these brachas? You know there's certain brachas, really ideally you're supposed to stand. For example, Brachos Torah. The bracha that we make in the morning, thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and really there are many issues with Brachos Torah. What type of bracha is it? Thanking Hashem. It's a bracha to allow us to learn Torah. Really, we're not supposed to be able to learn Torah till we make our Brachos Torah. One of the halachas within Brachos Torah is that one should stand ideally when they make the bracha. Okay? So circumstances, a person not able to. But for the most part, if a person is able to, that's a bracha that one should stand. What about these brachas? Does one have to stand when they hear thunder and lightning? By an earthquake, you should make the bracha standing. Or hunched somewhere. Right? Running. But the Pri Megadim talks about this actually in his Psicha. It says ideally one does not have to stand when he makes the bracha. But l'chachila, it's better. Some poskim say to say it. Someone asks, what happens when you're driving? You're driving down the street, check it out. Wow, look at that thunder. Look at that rainbow. So driving is an interesting thing. We gave a share a couple of years ago about Tfilas Haderech. And there are many people, Tfilas Haderech, you're staying on the road. But that's a misnomer. It's Tfilas Haderech off the road. Now, this works whether your car has four-wheel drive or not. But really the bracha of Tfilas Haderech is really, ideally should be said off-road, not on the road. And really that applies to other brachas too. There is a certain amount of concentration that one needs, even though nowadays people could drive with a headset in their ear, a phone in their hand, and a few fingers on a wheel. But as we all know, that's not recommended. And when you're driving, you really should be not distracted and totally focused on the road. And just like you're supposed to be totally focused on the road when you're driving, you're supposed to be totally focused when you make a bracha, ideally. And it's cute. They have those signs up in a lot of shuls. When you make a bracha of Asher Yatzar, the first thing that little sign says is stop. Focus. Not like your bracha. Right? Many times, we're always in a run and we do everything on the go and neglect to say while you're driving, you're also eating your sandwich. And some people have the art of being able to shave also when they drive. A lot of skills people pick up over the years. But all these things, ideally, you should make brachas when you're in the most focused, stationary situation you're in to give it the utmost respect. Now, we mentioned that there's a short period of time that one has to make these brachas. You could really only make these brachas toch kedei dibur, within 3 or 4 seconds of it happening. So, now the poskim talk about Pashtus, one can make these brachos even if they're not outside, just by seeing it through a window. Now this is in contrast. There are other brachos, for example, Kiddush Levana. Many of us just did that last night. Kiddush Levana, you're not supposed to do from inside. You have a beautiful window, ceiling to floor window. You clearly see outside, especially nice penthouse. I see clearly. You got to go outside. The brach of Kiddush Levana, right? Not only you have to go outside, right? There, the point is you can't do it with a covering over you, which also sometimes is tricky. A lot of times in shuls, and the one shul in the community in particular, right? There's an overhang, and many people, it's like the back of the bus issue, right? You come out, everyone just stands here, and you're stuck behind the other guy, so you could be stuck under the awning. So really, you're not supposed to say Kiddush Levana under an awning. You should take the extra few steps to walk, not under an awning, not under a covering. But that's something, Kiddush Levana is something you have to say outside. You can't just look through a window, you can't have a roof over you. But when it comes to these brachos, most of the Shlomo Zalman brings down, you could, and it happens many times, you don't want to necessarily be outside in the middle of a storm. You don't want to see thunder and lightning up close. So one could recite those brachos while watching a window. Now, if that's so, that means, and definitely could happen, let's say in the middle of davening, and all of a sudden there's a storm outside. Does one stop in the middle of davening to make these brachos? Now we just said that you only have a window of 3 to 4 seconds to make these brachos. So does one mafsik, does one halt one's davening to make these brachos? So it said, well, where are you up to davening? Good point. You're right, it depends. The Milch Monastery wouldn't do it. But the Mishnah Berurah earlier even brings that, some poskim say even more, but the Mishnah Berurah says between the prakim, between the paragraphs, within Brachos Kriya Shema, certainly within Pesukei de Zimra, within the paragraphs, one could make these brachos. So if you're towards the end of a paragraph, you see the lightning, seemingly you can quickly finish up, so within 3 to 4 seconds, and all you need is 3 to 4 seconds simply, I think, to start the bracha, and you can make the bracha. Amazing.
Did you have to do that first lightning strike?
Great question. Yeah. See, if you saw the first lightning strike, great. If you missed that one, then seemingly you could do it by a later one, if there is a later one.
We have lightning storms. You just finish Shmonesrei and then say after Shmonesrei. You can do that?
Yes. Yes. You never know if this is going to be the last one, but you're right. In South Florida, we have plenty to choose from, usually, within a storm. Yes?
So timing-wise, within the storm, so to speak, there are certain time limitations on these too, right? For example, you should only make one bracha on a storm.
So I'm going to get to that.
Right?
Excellent.
Or
Yes.
one per day. Or, they're different.
Yes, excellent point. Right? We know there's a concept, you're supposed to make 100 brachos a day. Right? And Mr. Brewer actually goes through counting out 100 brachos. I think there's an app soon to be published, 100 brachos a day app. It tells you when you reached your 100 brachos a day. You really don't need it. The average day, that's pretty easy. Days that gets tricky is Shabbos, Yom Tovim. So a guy in South Florida has a great idea. So why don't I make a bracha? It's raining. It's raining a lot. So I'll get quite a few. I'll add a few thunder and lightnings there. So that will, push up my score. Especially if they have tracking, 100 brachos a day is not a competition. It's not like you're trying to beat out your friend. I got more brachos than you. Even though one of my kids once came home from back in New York or some project, how many brachos you say in this? If you know anything about halacha, you're not sure. One of the most important, a very important element in halacha, you're not supposed to be marba brachos. You're not supposed to make extra brachos when not needed. You'll make a bracha on every bite of food you take. So that's brachos levatala. So sometimes they have these well-meaning contest for kids, but they fail to teach kids the most basic of halachas, and the whole contest could be counter halacha.
Weren't the 100 Brachos instituted by David because of a natural event?
Yeah, good point. You're right. We look at it. These brachos are a security for us. It helps us out. Just as we mentioned before, just like Tehillim is something you would say in these situations. But yeah, these brachos are to market, to add feelings, but also at the same time it's a schus. Sure. So you got to do 100 brachos. So guy has an idea. Okay, I'll add in all my thunder and lightnings. So you can't do that. They're exactly as was put. There's some language in the poskim talks about once a day you can make these brachos. But other poskim said once within a storm. That's a little trickier. That's why we need our meteorologist there in the back. But you have to know when, okay, this is the end of one front, and this is a second front, it's a second storm, and different patches, and this, well, that gets a little tricky. The simplest recipe you'd say is once a day. Once a day, you can make a bracha on thunder and lightning, rainbows, all these things. But more than that, unless it's crystal clear to you that this is a totally separate storm, at 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, yeah. Now, more halachas. Yes.
Quick question. There's a connection between the thunder and the lightning, and you're only allowed to make on one or the other?
So excellent point. That I'm going to get to last, because that's the most complicated. So I go step by step, the easier ones. Okay, you could sit, you could be inside, once a day, 3 to 4 seconds. These halachas are one-liners. That one I'm going to get to.
Back burner.
Yeah. Now back to, we were talking, you would make them even in the middle of davening. As long as you get to a spot that you could break, let's say Ben Aprakim, between the paragraphs of Kriya Shema, paragraphs of Pesukei Zimra, one would make those brachos.
Through a window.
What about through a window? What about in the middle of learning? Baruch Hashem, you're sitting and learning, and all of a sudden you see a lightning strike. Does one make a bracha? So I found from none other than Chaim Kanievsky, who doesn't break his learning for too many things, says 100% that one would, even in the middle of learning, stop, make these brachos, and then return to learning. Because since this is what you call a mitzvah or veres, it's a mitzvah which is passing, which you only have the chance to do it right now, so then you should chop it right and do it right now. Now again, my Floridians who say, no, I know this storm, I'm going to get lots of lightning afterwards too, let me wait a few more minutes. Okay, you can hedge your bets.
I've
Maybe.
heard, Rabbi, also we're the lightning capital of the world. I've heard this about Florida.
Really?
I don't know what
I thought it was Tampa Bay.
the Tampa Bay area and Florida in general. Specifically, right.
Neither. If the world is Bangladesh.
See, this is why we have our meteorologists.
Bangladesh, thank you, meteorologist.
In the U.S., yes, but not in the
Oh, we are in the U.S.?
Yeah.
Florida, the state of Florida.
State of Florida. Okay, you heard it here. Now, Bangladesh.
And all joking,
Maybe that's why people don't go there.
Rabbi, all joking aside, it's a statistic how many die every year in Florida from lightning strikes. It's a stat.
I do take it quite seriously.
Don't be outside the light.
My kid plays in Little League in Hollywood.
Yeah.
When they see any lightning, an alarm, like I grew up in New York, right? Every Erev Shabbos, I don't know how they do this, Adi Mazeh, but the air raid sirens go off. They haven't used these since World War II, except somehow the Jews with Protexia and the government got them to sound them off, every Friday afternoon to warn us the Shabbos is coming. So you hear an air raid siren.
That's something tested to make sure they keep working.
Yeah, right. I remember seeing once in a while there were these lawsuits say, like, why are the air raid sirens going off? Friday afternoon. The Irish person in the pub is like a little like, hey, what's going on there? But those are pretty loud. But the lightning siren I hear in Hollywood is 10 decibels louder. Pretty strong. They do take, lightning is something to be taken seriously. In a pool, get out. Yeah, it is. It's an important thing. Right. You should maybe first get out of the water before you make the bracha.
Right.
Yeah. Right? And as said, yeah, maybe there are some brachas you could say while running. That might be one. Now, let me start with you this Mishabura Sivkat and Hay. It's a big Mishabura over here. And just a couple more halachas and thunder lightning I'd like to touch upon. So look at the Mishabura in Sif Katan Hay. Right? We said the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber wrote that on any of these you make the bracha of Osam Asperatius. But if you want, you could make the bracha of Kol Chad V'ras Olam. So the Chavetz Chaim writes, and this is from a Taz, V'ha'olam noagim, the world's minhag is levarach al brakim osem masa bereshis. On lightning, you make the bracha of osem masa bereshis. V'al ramim, and on thunder, shekol gevras ma'olam. Even though the Mechaber says pick and choose, but the classic minhag is for lightning you make osem masa bereshis. But for thunder, one makes kochel gvuras amaliyom. Why? The Chavetz Chaim says it's logical. The Chem Estaver, shayidei haram nira gvuroso shal Kadosh Baruch Hu yosem yibarek. Even though we just had the stats here for South Florida, and lightning is dangerous, lightning is fearful. It's shown people die from it. But nevertheless, there's a certain more fear people have naturally from thunder, right? I think kids are the perfect proof, right? My kids are much more nervous, little kids, from the sound of thunder than from a flash of lightning.
No one's ever died.
So, right, and no one's ever died from it. But Alpha Picane, the natural phenomenon strikes fear. So the Chavetz Chaim says that's why we pick the minhag is when it comes to the thunder, that's what we're going to say. Hashem's koach and v'raso puts fear in us. Okay? Now, an important halacha. Let's say you mix it up. Gosh, you sat through a share, the past half hour, we've been talking about Osam Asaresh, it's called v'ras ma'olam. Watch, it's going to rain tonight. Everyone's going to get all excited. Yes, I just heard share on this. This is what I'm going to do. And then you mix up the brachas. Right? You didn't have the app, and you said kochel gvuraso on lightning. You said osam ma'asereshis on thunder. So I saw people speak out. You're okay. If you mix them up, it's 100% fine. Not only b'di'evet, it's really l'chachila. Mechaber says both brachos are interchangeable for each other. You could use both of these brachos are applicable in either phenomenon. So if you mixed it up, you're all good. Look, ideally, the Chavetz Chaim says the minhag is for lightning we'll say osam asperatius, for thunder we'll say kochel gvras ma'olam. But if you mix it up, all good. Oh, so they talk about that. Good point.
Good question.
Do you have to see the bolt, or sort of the tail, or the light? So that I saw spoken out. Ideally, one should see the actual bolt, which is not, you have both, but I'm not sure. I think you could even make it with the other one also. I think that's what I saw. But let me jump back before I get to the next issue of what happens when you get them both together. Just two more quick halachas. We mentioned before, here in South Florida, especially, you get the Mefarshim Shulchan Aruch talk about it in the summertime. In Florida, it's always the summertime.
Yeah.
You could get lightning. You could get lightning strikes, lightning in the sky, just from humidity. And you'll see sometimes there'll be lightning in the sky without thunder, without a storm even coming, just flashes of lightning. Does one make a bracha of osam ma'asereshis on those flashes of lightning, really not with a storm? So this is a very interesting machlokas between the Chavetz Chaim and Mishnah Berurah and the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan brings down 100%. You make brachos on both. Any type of lightning you see in the sky, make these brachos. Chavetz Chaim, and this is actually an earlier Mishnah Berurah, there he writes that you, the end of Gimel, the Chavetz Chaim writes that you only make it on a lightning bolt, which is with a storm, which will be with thunder and rain. But just in the sky, one will not make it. Very interesting machlokas. What's considered lightning?
I can't visualize, I've never seen lightning without a clouds or a storm associated with it.
No, right? I've noticed here in Florida, it's one of my things. Right? I never saw that in New York, but you just get from humidity, right? I'm sure you could Google it, you'll find it.
Humidity is a cloud.
Right?
Humidity is a cloud.
You know, you got to take your meteorologist wherever you
You
go.
don't see it in New York City, but if you go up to the Catskills, you'll see it
Right, that could be during the summer.
in summer.
Now, what happens when you have both of these together? Thunder and lightning together. So here it gets a little tricky. As we mentioned before, there are these two brachos. But really, these two brachos are interchangeable and they work for each one. So what do you do now? I saw a flash of lightning. Before I had a chance to, right then I heard thunder. Does one make two brachos or not? Simply, one says, look, didn't we say we make one bracha on thunder, one bracha on lightning? Yes, but really the brachos are interchangeable. And I could use one bracha for both. So what do I do? Machlokas through the ages. Rabbi Yaakov Emden said one would make brachos on both. I saw some people add, especially now that we sort of have like a minhag, that we make on lightning, osam aspirations, and on thunder, kochel gvos ma'olam. Yeah. Even if you're seeing them simultaneously, you can make two brachos. However, the later poskim, the Chavetz Chaim, and on this, the Aruch HaShulchan is in agreement. We don't, the opposing attitude is, as we mentioned before, we don't want to make extra brachos. We don't want to make a bracha, what I mean by extra brachos, a bracha which may not be needed. A bracha, right? A bracha which might be a levatala. We don't want to make a bracha like that. So therefore, if you get your thunder and lightning back to back, before you had a chance to make any brachos, then you just make one bracha and the potter's both. That exempts both. So when would one make both brachos? If there's a pause in the action. You see lightning. So this all the more so encourages a person, you got to be on top of your game. You got to grab it right away. So if you see lightning, you can make a bracha, Baruch Osam Aspirations. Then a moment later you hear thunder. You could make a bracha, Kol Chol Gvurasam Al Olam. The Geder basically is, I saw David Feinstein, just like to spell this out. As long as you start making that first bracha, then you are 100% open. You can make the second bracha if you heard the thunder. So I see lightning, right away I say, Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu Melech Haolam, Osam Aspirations. Even if towards the end of my bracha, I'm already hearing the thunder, no problem, you can still make the bracha on the thunder.
But what, if you heard the thunder
But-
3 minutes later, a different thunder?
Yeah, for sure you can make the bracha.
Oh,
Right. What gets tricky, the Chavetz Chaim, because remember the Chavetz Chaim said you can't just make it on a heat lightning strike. So that's where we need our Floridians to know if it's a heat strike or not a strike. But yeah. So what comes out, I'll take questions before I summarize. Yes?
When you hear both at the same time, or you hear and you see at the same time, you make one bracha. You make it on the last one you heard,
Fascinating. Great question. Really, either bracha works. I think, right, if you look what the Chavetz Chaim says, the Chavetz Chaim recommends making the bracha of Osa Masa Brachos al Shneim. Sounds like that's the easier one we're comfortable saying on both. Yes?
So the lightning and the thunder may be separate, but may be part of the same event, right?
Right. So even if they're part of the same event, as long as there's some separation between them, that you could get both brachos in, then you're good to go. But if they come one right after the other, basically simultaneously, so then you only really should make one bracha. Which bracha? Osamas Brachos.
So based on the science we understand now, and I'm not sure how much they knew at the time that they were writing,
Right.
it's almost always one event because it's the clouds banging which causes both the lightning and the thunder. So if you're getting both right away at the same time, that means you're in much more danger and it's much more intense because the lightning must be striking very close by if the thunder is so close to it.
I'll tell you what I'm in danger of. I'm in danger of not getting to unicorns and rainbows. Oh my. So hold on. So I think we went through pretty thoroughly these halachas of thunder and lightning, and I think here in South Florida, these are almost daily halachas. You really, especially during the summer, they come up all the time. So it's good to go over all these basics on halacha, when to say it, how much time you have, what comes first, what comes second. Good. We got those down. Let me get to unicorns. Unicorns, I didn't put it in your sheet, but in Simon Reish Chaf Hey, Sif Ches, there the Mechaber in the Shulchan Aruch talks about making brachos on all different weird things. And it talks about, different, weird people, weird scenarios. Yeah? I'm not going to go there. But one of the halachas it talks about also, it says making a bracha the eshapil the esakuf on an elephant and on a kuf, an ape, a monkey. One would make a bracha mishana habrios, and this is a practical halacha. That means if you now most poskim understand they just gave elephant and monkey as examples, but really this applies to any exotic animal. Animals we don't see, we don't live in the jungle, we don't see on a daily basis. So one would make these brachos. That means if you go to the zoo, you would make these brachos. Now, there are some shilas. Is this all? Let's say you go to the zoo, you have a seasonal pass. You take them all the time, once in a lifetime, here, there. You work in a zoo. Some people feel like that. So, those are, most posts can say you could make these brachos when you see animals, all types of animals. However, this I found, it knocked my socks off. You think, I picked, really when I decided to throw in unicorns, I figured I'm giving a shit about rainbows, thunder and lightning, I have to spice it up a little bit. So I just decided to sprinkle in unicorns. It's still popular today. I remember when I was a kid, the Ringling Brothers and Barnum Lane Circus discovered a unicorn.
It was a fake.
Until, of course, they found out it's a fake.
They attached a chauffeur to his head.
Yeah. But I remember that. Unicorns were in style. So Baruch Hashem, they're still quite in style. Still a fascinating phenomenon. So I figured I'll sprinkle in unicorns. In doing my research, I came across the most wild idea. Rabbi Vaji Yosef understands Vesapil Vesakuf, and the Shulchan Aruch says you make a bracha on apes and elephants, monkeys. It's dafka those two animals. Why? I'm reading to you inside. Umishum shebedor haflaga. This week's parsha, right after Dor HaMabul, we had the generation of Dor HaFlaga. These people that wanted to build towers, spaceship, go up and fight God. So simply understood, so Hashem punished them, Bilbo messed up their languages, scattered them around the world. So It's actually a Gemara in Sanhedrin. I believe it's Kuf Yud Beis, Chon Beis. You can check it up. Pretty wild, right? The Gemara says, and this is how Rebbe Vaji Paskins, Shum Shebedor HaFlaga Anish HaKadosh Baruch Hu V'hafach min Anashim Ahema Lekufim Mupilim. Hashem punished some of those people by changing them into elephants and apes and monkeys. That's why we make the bracha Mishana Habrios. Hashem changed the creations. Fascinating.
So the evolution is
Reverse,
right, but it's backwards.
right. That means they're wrong. Reverse evolution. It's a Gemara in Sanhedrin, and Rav Vaji says that's pshat in this halacha, why the Shulchan Aruch picks specifically elephants and monkeys. Because that was a punishment that Hashem made. Hashem changed people of the Dor HaFlaga into these creations. And if you see one, right, you're supposed to make this bracha of Mishana Habrios. Hashem changed the creations. Boy, that gives a new perspective when you go to the zoo and see an elephant.
Were there elephants before? Or that's one elephant?
Excellent point. Right. That's probably a good kasha. Right? Excellent point. I'm not, right, one of the kashas people always had, this is amazing. Right? How did the elephant fit on the teva? Now, I know the teva is a big thing. Right? There's some place that we talk, right, you know about the Ark encounter? Some guy built a teva.
There's one
You
in
see it?
Kentucky.
It's right. It's like Kentucky.
There's a few of them
It's
now.
huge.
Some of them are building them.
Right? You see it. It's huge.
Size.
They had flood damage,
So,
Yes.
according to that opinion, it's just those two animals, or
Just those two animals.
oh,
Just those two.
but it doesn't mean that he converted other people to other
Other animals. No. Only specifically these two animals. And that's why the Shulchan Aruch picked only these two. Not as an example for all others.
So where do you make the bracha on? Just these two, or on other animals too?
So it's machlokas. You know, some poskim say it applies to all animals, but Rav Vaja understands based on this Gemara, no, it's specifically these two. Now, just throwing around quick, funny midrashim, right? The concept of a unicorn, I've traced just at least two Gemaras that might talk about it. It's a Gemara in Shabbos that talks about the skins they use from a tachash for the tapestry of the Mishkan. So some say, the Gemara says, it was an animal that only appeared in those times, and it was very colorful, and they used its skins, and then it disappeared after, till Ringling Brothers and Ron Ringling found it.
They found one.
And there's another Gemara, there's a Gemara in Zvachim, this is not so well known. It's also out there in the Kufya, I think also Kufya Gimel, somewhere over there. Talks about that there was an animal with a horn on its head that was too big, didn't get in to the teva, but grabbed on with its horn onto the teva. Was a castaway. I guess him and Og, I don't know. But so that's also a unicorn on the teva. Amazing ideas. So those are halachas one would make if you see unicorns, animals, all the like. Getting finally to rainbows. So you look in the back of your sheets, Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim Reish Chav Tes. There it talks about the bracha when you see a rainbow in the sky. So one would make a bracha. Now this bracha you need an app for because it's a few extra words. Bracha Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam. Right? You see the halacha. It says Zochar Habris V'Neman Bivriso V'Kayim B'Mamara. Hashem remembered this covenant that he had and keeps his word, and we do that. The Bir Halacha brings an important suffix. What happens if you only see part of the rainbow? You don't see the full half circle, you see part of it. So the Chavetz Chaim and the Bir Halacha is not sure if one could make a bracha if they only saw part of it. And he leaves off as a suffix, which means it's not so simple what to do. I did see modern day, I saw they bring from Uli Yashav, he says that one could make the bracha only if they see part. But the Chavetz Chaim himself in the Ber Halacha has a suffix, does one make it on a rainbow if they only see part of it? Now there's another aspect of a rainbow, right, that the Shulchan Aruch itself says, V'asar l'stakel bo b'yoser. The Shulchan Aruch says don't stare at it too much. Right? It even says it could be damaging to your eyes. What the Chavetz Chaim brings, right there in Sivkot and Aleph, the Chavetz Chaim brings that, according to Machaya Adam, that if one sees a rainbow, he shouldn't tell his friend about it. One sees a rainbow, you shouldn't tell your friend. And I saw Simcha Zissel Brody wonders about that. Now, what does a rainbow represent? Let me quickly get this out.
Covenant.
Right? A rainbow represents Hashem made this covenant, he's not going to destroy the world again. But when there's a rainbow up there, that means he really wants to, but it's only because of this covenant that he doesn't. Right? I find it quite ironic. We all know what, in today's world, who took the rainbow as a symbol.
They'll get there.
It's quite amazing. If anyone goes to Chazal, why did Hashem bring about a marble? Batimale ha'aretz chametz. The world was filled with immorality. Specifically, Chazal say this type of immorality. So it's quite fascinating. The people, which had they been around in the times of the marble, would bring a marble, and maybe today they would too. And the symbol that Hashem said he's not going to destroy the world as a rainbow, and that's what they use as their symbol. But the rainbow, it might be beautiful, it might look good, but a rainbow by definition means there's reason to destroy the world. Hashem isn't happy, but because when you see that rainbow, you're supposed to remember, Hashem's keeping his word. And really, it's a bad thing. So that's simply this idea that one shouldn't go and tell someone else, I saw a rainbow. Because what you're really saying is, I see a bad omen. I see a bad sign. Now, I saw one of the Mefarshim ask, the way some of the Rishonim learn, how does Hashem not bring a flood? It's not just Hashem sees the rainbow. It's that the rainbow is sort of the bat signal. The rainbow is a signal to righteous people. Realize what the rainbow is, do tshuva, and that will help save the world. So if you see the symbol, why can't you tell somebody? You know, everyone should be running to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, running to your local Rav, running yourself. Tell them, hey, let's do tshuva and save the world. That's your signal. So it seems like the answer is, despite the fact that there's that there might be tolelas in noticing it, first of all, it's up there in the sky. Batman will see the symbol. He'll get to it. Don't ever have to tell him that. But the rainbow, the association we have with the rainbow, nice, beautiful phenomenon, so colorful, so this, if you really understand the meaning behind it, how it's a symbol that really Hashem was ready to destroy the world yet again, but doesn't do it because of this promise that he made and the schus of righteous people that do tshuva when they see such a thing. So it gives a different perspective of what it's all about. Thank you very, very much.